Hey, I guess we're ready?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
All right, good. I don't know. I think they've been having a lot of serious discussions, so I don't know if we're the fun part now, but we'll try. I don't know if we're fun or maybe practical, but I thought I would begin maybe with the idea of just sort of what you can do in your everyday life, or what you do in your everyday lives, or what you do in your work in terms of kind of being mindful about food. So we talked a little bit about this in advance, but and there were a couple of great tips and things that I hadn't even really thought about before. So really just begin with that, I thought.
Well, I grew up in a farm in Florence, in Italy, and even if my father was a surgeon and my mother is now a retired school teacher, the background of the land was very, very strong where we were. And I cannot get out of my head the fact that if there was any crumbs left on the plate after dinner, my mother would point out the 10 cents or the 5 cents or the 3 cents of food that I was leaving on the table. And to me, it was a practical joke because I was forced to finish. But the rule was never put on your plate what you don't think you can eat. And the rule, make sure that you leave the table hungry. There is that sense of romance that is not supposed to end by filling up your stomach. There is that romanticism that kicks in the moment that you leave the table. It's like looking forward to go back to it.
Right.
That was one of the main approaches. So I live by that. I really control it's portion control is nothing really, if I can, goes in the garbage. Recycling as much as I can, leftovers as much as I can, and I pretty much float with an empty fridge at home. My kids hate me for it, but that's how I like it. Always fresh, always on demand. You like it? You're hungry? Just go buy it.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up pretty poor in Arkansas and actually the suburbs of New York. And it was the same way, whereas in Chinese cuisine, it's natural to eat all the, what they call like the nasty bits, all the offal. And so that was actually very common to us. Now it's much more expensive than like the center of the plate meats. But my parents were masters at, or maybe they didn't even know that they were masters at serving us foods that weren't kind of like, it's like we didn't understand what a lamb chop was. It was just like, lamb kidneys or something like that.
Right, so you were sort of nose to tail before nose to tail was a thing, and that you were sort of eating the other parts,
right, or whatever. It's a thing when you're poor.
Right. Did one of you talk a little bit about the idea, I'm trying to remember if this came up in our discussion before, and about sort of also the idea of, if you're doing it right in terms of food waste, you really shouldn't have doggy bags either or whatever. I mean, did that come up in our discussion or whatever?
Yeah, so I think I brought up the point that kind of how we're tackling food waste as chefs now, and one of the things you don't really think about is like portions in America in particular began to get out of hand, and we won't name any culprits, but now you're starting to see it come back the other way. And how that pertains to food waste is that, if we're controlling the portions and it's something reasonable at a reasonable price and it's good and it's delicious and you're able to finish the whole thing, then you don't have to put it in a box, put it in a bag, have some disposable silverware that goes back to your fridge, and in all honesty, 9 times out of 10, the next morning or 2 days later.
I don't know who eats old tacos the day after.
Yeah, you take it, you throw it out, and sometimes you just take it home just to be polite, and mainly, if you look at it in that way, it's doing more than just controlling the waste of the food, but the waste of the to-go stuff, and you tackle it on that small scale is just kind of how this stuff starts rolling.
So you're saying I have to give up my cold pizza?
Well, no, that you can
cold
eat.
Cold pizza actually is one of those things that will last forever. My wife loves it. I think it ties into what Marian and Nestle was saying before. It is this is a land where there's too many calories that are available. What about sitting up at the table and finishing your dish of wonderful pasta and missing that final bite that would have stuffed you up?
Right.
That really creates also the attachment, and to me it helps developing an attachment towards the food and respect. In Italy we don't use the doggy bag. The concept absolutely does not exist. If you're home, leftovers always go back into the fridge, and lunches in the middle of the night, cold pasta for lunch or whatever it is the day after. But for the most part, when you leave a restaurant, it's actually something that is starting now, but mainly because tourists request it. And because tourists very often end up ordering too much food because they're not satisfied with the size of the portion, and then ultimately they realize. But also, I think it's almost like love, like too much all together. Like there is nothing that you can achieve if your plate is too full.
Right.
If your abilities of consuming are limitless.
Right.
It is nice to long for something, to miss it, to have that little room.
Right. Even before we go to too much consumption, going back to your idea of the empty fridge, it also has to do with how you shop. And I think you had talked a little bit about the Italian, and I mean, I really think of it as a European model. I don't know if it's an Asian model of really the daily shopping trip, and how we, in America, we do those big, I mean, in New York City, maybe a little less so, but we do those big weekly grocery shopping trips where we buy all this stuff that then, some of which probably ends up leading to waste. But talk a little bit about that idea or whatever.
Growing up, I think, and this is one of the reasons why my career to a degree is shifting, not necessarily abandoning or leaving behind what it means to be a chef, what it means to be a cook for people, but the attention that I decided to give to these things. In Italy, the fact that you need to buy your fresh milk or stop at the bakery or decide if you want to meat or fish for dinner, it is not in your book. It's something that you do walking home or it's almost like calling mom. Going to do the groceries. The first time that I arrived in America, when I met Deborah and I relocated to Los Angeles, I was incredibly happy about the 24-hour supermarket experience. Like the fact that if you want chocolate at 4 a.m., you can. Or if you have a baby and you need formula or diapers. So that aspect of convenience, to me, is what messes with us.
Right.
Because it's always there, it's always available. If in Italy you don't have milk past 7 p.m., for your coffee the morning after, you better have a friend that has a bar, or you're done. So the idea of knowing what's in your fridge, like just I can tell you what I have in my fridge at home right now.
What do you have now?
Watermelon, cantaloupe, some cold cuts, 2-3 different kind of cheeses, roasted carrots left over from last night, beets left over from last night, fish, leftover, nobody's gonna eat that shit. Sorry, fish doesn't make a good leftover. Beers, 3-4 different kinds, not too many, but 3-4 different kinds. Milk, orange juice, 3 shots of vitamins and lactobacillus that that's for probiotics and stuff. And a freezer that nobody ever looks into it because I don't use frozen food. So it gets stashed with whatever crap my kids force me to buy. Now my youngest daughter these days is vegetarian. So she's going with the tofu, soy,
We all, by the way, have a younger daughter who's vegetarian. So anyhow.
It is. But you see, I was reading something really interesting the other day, and I think obviously it was probably from Michael, but something that is happening to me as Michael Pollan, I call him Michael as if it was like, a dear friend. There is this becoming sort of vegetarian as a social moment of conscience, as opposed to the poor baby veal that I don't want to butcher. I love veal chops. I don't think I'll ever stop, but I'll have them maybe twice a year instead of making it the weekly occurrence. So there is that sense of respect towards the planet, towards the environment. Sustainability means understanding where you're placed right now, where your food is coming from, what you're doing with, and what you're doing with the leftovers and the waste. And to him, it's like the same, like the poor stuff that used to make the soup, it is now what is, the novelty food, what is people are charging you for your restaurant. I find it so weird.
I want to shift gears a little bit and it's a little away from food waste, but it does have to do with sustainability. If I think what has been the single most hot button topic, at least in New York, I don't know, I don't want to speak necessarily outside of New York, because I know you're based outside of New York. In New York, it's been the plastic straw. So death to the plastic straw. My company, we learned the other day, is also saying no more plastic utensils in any of our cafeterias or dining places, or even where we get our coffee, they're plastic utensils. I'm curious how is this playing? Where are you at with this, and how is this going to play out? Because I really do think this has been kind of this is the moment when sustainability became sort of part of the mass consciousness, at least in the city, I think. You know?
Like I'm from Washington D.C. and it's a huge hot topic there among like the bars and restaurants because we're like the worst at it, right? And so I'm actually just this past weekend we had the grand opening of a hotel called Eaton in Washington D.C. And one of its brand pillars is actually sustainability and wellness. And so as a function of that, we've actually throughout the entire hotel, you're talking about like, you know, 4 food and beverage outlets, like 1,000 covers a day. We don't have a single plastic straw. We actually have these like super weird compostable napkins that are, I don't even know what they're made of. But so like we went through this process of trying to find non-plastic straws, and you go to paper and you know, they're kind of horseshit and they just disintegrate after.
I call them the weep wash straws.
Yeah.
I mean, they never quite work or whatever.
And so we actually switched over to this company called World Centric that makes a plant-based straw and actually feels like plastic. The only the great thing about it is it's compostable. You know, I think people have tried to eat it, but I don't think you can actually do that. But you can't use it over a certain temperature. But it's actually been like a fantastic alternative, and people do take notice. Right, and you can attack it like through those ways, and there are some places in DC that just refuse to give you something a straw to drink out of,
right?
Or they have signs that say if you really want a straw, you got to ask for it, and if you do, you're going to get this straw. It is a hot topic. It's weird that became the hot topic of all things that is bringing attention to it, but it's an interesting thing, and I don't think that's the last thing that we're going to have to tackle in terms of how things have always been done in bars and restaurants.
You know, I hadn't thought about asking this, but going back to something, speaking of overindulgence, the bread plate. Maybe that should be an optional thing.
What, sorry?
The bread plate.
Oh, no.
You know.
No. Are you kidding me?
Okay,
I don't
okay.
sit down if there's no, and trust me, like at least I adjusted my expectations because
Right.
European bread is very different from American bread, but I do not sit at the table if there's no bread. I mean, if I'm having a burger, I don't need bread on the side. But if I'm having pasta, I need bread on the side. I
Right.
need to clean and I eat bread in between. But I wanted to say something. Do you remember, I'm 45, right? And when I grew up, this idea of technology interfering with our food sources meant food coloring, GMOs. It was the big industry using technology for their own profit. Now, for example, with the straw issue, we are finally leveraging good technology and people that are devoting energies and thought to how does technology actually can impact or better our life situation. There's a new startup that came out a couple of weeks ago that started raising a lot of money. I think they're based in Seattle, and they're doing it with seaweed, you know, straws with seaweed. My daughters are now using metal straws, pain in the ass. Impossible to clean.
I mean,
you put them sideways in the dishwasher, the water doesn't go in. You put them in the top, it falls down, everything fucking blocks. So it's like you drink, and they don't drink soda. So in theory, you know, fundamentally, they use it for water, iced tea. But you can't start cleaning a pipe. I'm like, look, why don't you just keep it, you know, keep your own straw and bring it to school? And that is, so I think it's not the straw that pollutes the environment. It's finding in our daily life all these little things that when added together have a gigantic impact.
right.
I don't drink out of straws for the most part, but I use napkins a lot.
Right.
So, you know, and the cutlery, you know, whatever utensils we use, you know, there's so many plant-based, like, you know, corn makes a really good, you know, fake plastic or, you know, compostable plastic. So it's, I think it's a fantastic time. I forgot what was your question. I needed to get that off of my chest. I'm so sorry.
One question I was also curious about is how much do you think, it's interesting talking about with the plastic straws because, you know, you do have people who seem to be taking umbrage, like I've heard of instances of people walking out of an establishment if it has plastic straws. But I'm wondering how much, consumers, I mean, this is obviously a whole day looking at food waste and issues around sustainability. I'm wondering how much consumers really care. I mean, you know, the mainstream consumer. I was just having a conversation with somebody who works a food publicist today, and we were talking about the just in general how gourmet food is just so broadly in the mainstream. But I'm wondering about these issues of food waste and whether, whether consumers really care. I mean, are people going into your restaurant asking, what are you doing with your scraps? I mean, is this, I'm wondering if this is something that, how much this has permeated the mainstream and how savvy consumers are. We know that there's some that care, but I'm wondering, because I think again, the straw issue sort of brought out that sensitivity level, but I'm wondering if people are very conscious about how your restaurant is doing things, for example.
Yeah, as a team, we actually had this discussion the other day because, nobody's going to be able to give us like a real percentage, right? But, but the sheer fact is it's just like vegans or vegetarians or people who care about food waste or people who care about plastic straws. Still the majority of our customers are people who just come to eat because that's what restaurants are, right? Restaurants should be an escape from your reality for 2 hours a day over a good drink, a good conversation, good service, right? Now they've become these social constructs for examples of good businesses and good business practices. As a hotel, I have an impact and sustainability consultant where I have a food waste, essentially, I don't even know what you call it, just a form, not a form, but it's a plan that I have to follow, and I'm assigning percentages to how much waste and how much improvement I do over a period of time, which is interesting, but I think the percentage of people that actually come to that specifically because we pay attention to food waste and we're good at it and we plan accordingly is still smaller, but I think it's growing very quickly, and it's kind of like one of those things that you want to pay attention to it on the front end rather than trying to catch up on the back end.
Well, I mean, people may want to do it. Restaurateurs may want to do it for all the right reasons, but I'm just wondering if consumers do. I think it's time to open it up for questions. So, fire away. Who's got questions?
Raise your hands. Come on. There's a hand over there.
I can't quite see, but I'll take the hand over there and
Thank you.
share your question.
Can you hear me? My name is John Eisen. I work at a company here in New York called Between the Bread. Gabriele, I love what you had to say about supermarkets. I think that seems to be an inverse relationship between sort of American capitalist mantra and being able to actually reduce food waste. Supermarkets have to have everything available at all times, otherwise they'll fail their consumer and perhaps lose business. So there are societies out in the world that do have more efficient systems, that do have a social contract that their population signs in order to all be part of the system. Do you think that the US can ever achieve what other more efficient developed systems have in Europe and elsewhere? Can we ever get there, or is it too inverse to the sort of financial profit model?
First of all, I think that here in the US you can achieve whatever you want. Regardless of the situation that this country is in right now, whatever you want to talk, politics, religion, this is a fantastic country. I came here with nothing. I came out with an idea, and I had the means to build it is fantastic. You can change, you can build, you can dismantle, you can do everything in this country. For the first part of your question, I do not think necessarily the 24-hour market was done just with the capitalistic intent. I think that actually was done to help people. But because of complacency, we fell into, oh my gosh, not only is open 24/7, but the prices are so low, we can afford. And by the means of afford, what happens with the damn meatballs on the spaghetti. We put it all together because we can. No, you don't need to. You can have either a dish of pasta or some meat, or you can have them but separated. You don't need to have them on the same meal. You can have one for lunch, one for dinner. I think it's the social experience what is important, and I also think the geography of your land is extremely important. I don't think that there's no 24-hour supermarkets in Italy because we can't. Roads are too small. There's no parking spots. People live above the shops where they shop. Neighborhoods are smaller. So the future of humanity in terms of the system leaving the city is in micro entities into smaller neighborhoods where are bringing it, not necessarily as local, because if you're in a city, maybe you don't have the vertical farm access, but maybe the neighborhood that is close to you has it. So I think it's a matter of just consciousness and discussion. As they were saying, it's not about going in the restaurant and asking who runs the restaurant, what are you doing about the plastic? It's just the fact that we're talking about it. So let's bring the conversation home. Let's bring it into the schools. Let's put metal straws into the backpack of our kids and don't bust balls when we go to the restaurant. You came here for a dinner. Shut the fuck up. Enjoy your dinner. Right?
Okay, other questions, other questions. Yeah, back there.
Yes, to your point, one time I ordered one of those meal kits from, I don't know, maybe Blue Apron or one of those. And I was horrified that they're packaging like 4 capers and little bottles of this and packages of that. So I think a lot of people are quite hypocritical.
They're packaging your life. They're not packaging
They're
your
packaging
death.
your life.
By doing that, you become, I mean, it's great. You're cooking. Whoa. But
I guess.
I mean, look, it's almost like, again, to me, it's almost like having sex, right? Do you order it on Prime? Do you wait for it to get via mailman? No, you gotta think about it. I mean, my wife hates me because I bring her coffee in the morning in bed every morning, and I'm like, what do you want for dinner? It's like, you're fucking kidding me, right? I'm like, no, I gotta think about it. I gotta spend some time thinking about it, but that's how I reason it. So it's an everyday banter. It's like being married, like we gotta always discuss.
But I'm just thinking, at least this way you don't buy the jar of capers. That would be one less thing in your fridge.
No, but you know, if it's in your head, and it's something that works for all chefs, if a food, to a degree, the fact that you have to take care of your kids, the fact that it's part of the domestic economy. My grandmother used to tell me that certain classes were taught in school not because you were a woman, but because running the budget of a kitchen, it's hard, it's tough, even for a mother, especially the single mother that has 3 kids. It's like, that's why she relies on the $1 burger. But if in the back of your head, you grow up knowing that you're walking by, you see a nice loaf of bread, you decide to buy it, you bring it home. And then you're walking somewhere else and you find something else. New York is a different city. It's hard, it's neighborhood by neighborhood. It's really hard. Like for me, still to shop, I don't have a favorite bakery. I bake my own bread. I go to the farmer's market, but not even that often because I don't like to shop too much. So why do I have to go to the farmer's market to get 1 head of lettuce? I'll get the organic at the store. It's, we can keep going like for hours about that.
Any other questions? There we go, in the center there.
My name's Gretchen. My question's for Tim. Obviously, you're a big chef working in some progressive restaurants, and I'm wondering if you feel like you have the creative license to really make what you want to make and use, you know, the scraps and the nasty bits and what have you, and if customers are receptive to that. Or if not, what tips do you have for chefs and restaurants to bring more of that food to the table?
Finding that balance is so hard, right? And these days it's even harder because of the internet. You know, in all honesty, consumers know as much about food as chefs these days. It's just down to technique and who actually gets it done. But like to a degree, like I have a dish where it's like a baby carrot dish, but it, like if you think about the baby carrot and how much biomass it has at the top to be able to grow this baby carrot, like how to use all the tops on the greens in the same ratio that you use the carrot itself creatively, and then you know you have to peel it and how to use those scraps. It's definitely a challenge, and a lot of it is based on like, and that's actually our challenge as chefs is how can we design a menu that's balanced, and that goes from you know the carrot itself or all the way down to like you know like breaking down chickens or whole animals, yeah, and that's why organs were so prevalent in our cuisine because you know they were essentially free, and that's why people started creating really good things. And so actually on my original menu I used the organs and I decided to make a salad of organ meats. The biggest challenge was like, that was great reuse and great like, and very creative and very fun to serve. The hardest thing was actually getting people to eat it. Yeah. And like I ate it, it was delicious, but selling it, like regardless of how much press it got or whatever we did to promote it or how tasty we made it, it was still a salad of organs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'd eat it. So
I would.
You know,
I would love to.
All right, I think that's about it. So good. Well, great. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.